to Books with Brandywine. Today I wanted to share with you the third part of my wrap-up for the book Junkie Trials. Since there were 17 books for the book Junkie Trials, there's way too many books to fit into one video. So this is part 3. If you haven't already seen part 1 where I talked about the books I read for the Mage quest and part 2 where I talked about the books that I read for the Outlaw quest, I will put those links below in the description so you can go find them. There will be 4 books in this one again, and that leaves me with 4 more books to try and read before the end of the month. So the first book was Royal Rangers, Ranger's Apprentice, Royal Ranger, Red Fox Clan. So it's the main series, and the branch-off series, and the name of the book. And this book I read for the Elven Guard, which was to read a book that had military stuff in it to help us learn the military maneuvers of the elves. And this book had a lot more military in it than I was expecting. So the first thing I'm going to say is this character here, this leader of the Red Fox Clan, is wearing a kitsune mask. But there's, as far as I can tell, there's no connection to Nihonja in here, which is what they call the Japanese island. And I don't know why they have that mask. They just have that mask. But it is supposed to be like a red fox mask. She even mentions that from above, like looking at them, like they look like actual foxes. So I think the mask in the book is supposed to be made out of like actual fox fur and a fox head. And so basically, as you find out in the first chapter, this dude is disgruntled because he thinks that he deserves to be on the throne. Her great-grandfather changed the law in the country so that a female could inherit the throne just as well as a male could, and then whoever her spouse would be the consort instead of the king. And it was done before her mom was born, so like the king didn't even know if he was going to have a male or female grandchild. He just decided it was best for the country. If it didn't matter if they were male or female, they could rule. And as it is, her mom, Princess Cassandra, is a really, really great queen. But this dude thinks he deserves to be king because he is a male relative. And so he has come up with this huge elaborate plot to take over the Queendom. Well, kingdom, because her dad's still alive, barely. And so that's the whole plot of this book. And this book is at least a 2-parter. It might be a 3-parter, but I know it's for sure a 2-parter because I have the second book. And nothing gets fixed in this book. Like, this book is basically setting up the whole plot and everything of him trying to take over. And the next book, I'm assuming, is them handling that. And so I really enjoyed it. It does break off into two, like it starts out together like one plot line, but then it splits up because her dad takes the head of the Rangers, and they go off to chase a group of like 50 people that they think are the Red Fox Clan. Turns out there's more to it than that. And so half of the book like follows what's going on with them, and the other rest of the book follows what's going on with her. And then even like later splits up between her and her mom because they're all 3 in like different places now. And so I really enjoyed it. I didn't mind that they split off and they had different plot lines. I enjoyed getting to find out what was going on everywhere. I cannot wait to read the second book and find out what happens. I mean, I kind of know what's going to happen, but because it's a kid's book and it's kind of predictable. I mean, I predicted immediately who the bad guy was, but like, so it's kind of predictable, but at the same time, like, I really enjoyed it. Okay, their castle is so cool. So, I don't have a picture of the castle, but if you can picture it, there's the keep in the middle, and then there's 4 towers that are around it. And each of those towers is connected to the keep at the 4th floor by a bridge. And the south tower is meant to be like the best place you could ever be if you're stuck in a siege. And so it's fully stocked with food, it's fully stocked with weapons, it has a rain cistern on the top so that it can collect the rainwater so that you never run out of water, and it rains every few days in their country, I guess, so they have a constant supply of clean water. They have a balcony that goes around it, so you can like walk around and get fresh air. It's huge inside the tower, so you can fit like a garrison of people, I guess. And the stairs that are leading up to the tower are collapsible so that you can get rid of parts of the stairs so people that are trying to chase you up can't follow you up. And it's completely made out of stone with only thick, hard, like the floors are made of wood, but it's like this really thick hardwood. So it'd be really, really hard to burn down the tower. And I'm like, that is so cool. Like, I don't know if there's any castles in real life that are actually built like that, but if they are, like, it's brilliant. Like, I love that. Like, from now on, their castle is the castle I will choose every time people say, like, what castle do you want as your castle? I want their castle. I want their castle. Anyway, oh, and don't even get me started on the secret passages in the castle. So, their castle is really awesome. But yeah, so I had a lot of fun reading this book. I read it in one day. It's really fast. And it is like, do they call it a mashup? Or crossover. So the guys from the Brother Band Chronicles are in this book. The Heron Brother Band are in this book. So that's really cool too. And they're in the next book that comes with that goes with this one. So, you know, that's exciting too. I love me some crossovers. So this book was really, really fun. I'm really glad I got to read it. Then from the Elven Guard, I went down to Holo Isle, which was to read a book that was atmospheric, I believe. But let me check my trusty notes. Atmospheric or horror book. So I read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which actually counts for both atmospheric and horror. He is one of the classic horror monsters, and God, this guy was like super atmospheric. So this whole book takes place in London, and it's basically just dark and foggy and creepy the whole time. Like, even in the daytime, it's foggy. And he spends whole paragraphs describing how foggy it is and how, like, scared he is as he's walking around. So, yeah, definitely atmospheric. This book was really different from what I was expecting. It is told from the point of view of a lawyer that is friends with Dr. Jekyll. His name is Mr. Utterson. So he's friends with Dr. Jekyll. He is in some ways connected to like each of the victims. And so I wasn't expecting it to be from his point of view. I was expecting it to be from Dr. Jekyll's point of view. But I suppose I should have expected it because I think this is a Victorian age classic. And from, like, the few books I've read from that era, they all seem to be like that. They're written from the point of view of an outsider who's looking in on what's going on. This book was way shorter than I was expecting. It is 91 pages. And in addition to being from the point of view of the doctor, I was not expecting the way it's told. So it starts out, the lawyer is walking with one of his friends, and they see a door, and his friend is like, you know, I have a story about this door, and about like this guy that lives on the other side of the door, and he tells him the story of something that he witnessed, and then it turns out the lawyer knows who lives on the other side of the door, and it's not the guy that the story was being told about, but the story was being told about Mr. Hyde, and he knows that on the other side of the door is Dr. Jekyll. And Dr. Jekyll's supposed to have like this pristine reputation, and he has in his possession a will from Dr. Jekyll saying that if he dies or if he goes missing for 3 months, everything that belongs to him goes to Mr. Hyde. And so he was already suspicious of Mr. Hyde, who he'd never met before, and then he found out about Mr. Hyde doing this evil deed. And then, like, Mr. Hyde murders someone, and it's witnessed, and so, like, all of this is going on, but it's all, like, from the view of this lawyer, Mr. Utterson, and Mr. Utterson, sometimes I swear he's just freaking himself out, like, nothing is even happening, he's just freaking himself out, and so then, like, all this stuff goes down, and then the whole, like, I don't know if it's, like, the last third of the book, but it's, like, a lot of the book. Like, up until that point, it seems like you don't even really know what's going on. But then, like, the last third of the book is all letter form, and it's a letter that was written by another doctor who is friends with Dr. Jekyll, and a letter written by Dr. Jekyll explaining everything that happened. And I was like, it was weird because, you know, reading modern books, I'm used to, like, things being laid out for me, like, as it's happening. So for it to be everything laid out as it's happening, and then the end of the book just being letters explaining what happened and why everything was going down, I was like, this is really weird. But at the same time, I actually really enjoyed this book. That being said, I think I would have enjoyed it more if I didn't know the secret of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And on the very off slight chance that someone out there doesn't know the secret, I'm not going to say what it is. Because I feel like I would have enjoyed this book so much more if I didn't know. And, like, even going through it, like, I tried to imagine what it would have been like for the people to be reading this book when it first came out, and then not knowing about the secret and not knowing, like, what was going to happen. Like, I think that would have been so awesome. I think the book would have been like 100 times scarier. I think everything would have been creepier. Your brain would have been going in one direction, and then it would have swung around to the other direction, and it would have been like, oh my goodness gracious. But I didn't get any of that because I knew going into it ahead of time. And I mean, this book is like over 100 years old. Obviously, there's going to be spoilers. Even my husband knew. And he doesn't read. Like, it's just one of those things that we just all know. And just like we know Dracula's the vampire, and we know that Dorian Gray has, like, a portrait that, you know, all his evilness goes into. Like, we know. Like, they're the classic monsters, and we just know. So, yeah. But I did really, really, really enjoy this book. I do plan on holding on to it. I want to read it again and see if there was stuff that I missed from it. It was 90 pages. It took me one day to read. It's very short. It's definitely a different style that I'm used to reading, but I would definitely encourage it. And if you do ever need a book that's atmospheric, dude, this book is atmospheric up the yin-yang. So the next book that I went to was Dwarf Mount, and that was to read a book that had just a hint of romance. And that perfectly describes Tuck Everlasting. Because the romance that was in this was literally just a hint. It was like as much as, okay, so she's 10 years old. Jessie Tuck is 17 years old, going on 104. And she, being a 10-year-old, seeing a good-looking 17-year-old, she has a major schoolgirl crush on him, kind of to be expected. His only reciprocation was that he tells her, like, hey, when you're 17, you can drink the water and be immortal too, and we can get married and have fun and live life. And that's pretty much it. Like, it doesn't really give anything else for the relationship. The book does cover only 3 days' time, which I had forgotten. I have read this book before. It is a reread for me. I did enjoy it the first time, but the ending always bugged me, like, so much. I can't remember if I was in elementary school or middle school when I read this, but I was very, very young. And the ending just bugged me. And so when I was going into this, I was really hoping that I would see new stuff as an adult that I didn't see as a kid that would make it better for me. And I did. Absolutely. That's absolutely what happened. So first of all, the ending was ever so slightly different from what I remembered. Like, the basics of it was the same, but the characters were different from what I remembered. And so I'm not going to tell you what happens in case you haven't read it yet. But the basic plot is that there's this little girl that lives in this village. And she lives on the outskirts of the village. And there's woods next to her house. And her family owns these woods. And nobody's allowed to go in it. And nobody does go in it anyway because there's a cow path that goes around the woods. So everybody just takes that path instead of going through the woods. Inside the woods, there is a spring. And that spring makes people immortal, which is what happened to the Tuck family. When they were passing through 87 years before, they drank from the spring because they were thirsty and continued on their way, not knowing. And so now it's been 87 years. They come back every 10 years to visit with their family. And so this book takes place while they happen to be coming back to visit with each other, because it's a mom and a dad and 2 sons, and the sons always leave to go work and whatnot. And so They're coming back after their 10 years, and that just so happens to coincide with when the little girl decides that she's going to run away. And she goes into the woods and runs into one of the boys, Jesse Tuck, and adventures ensue. And so I was expecting it to be much more adventures. I felt like it was more a commentary on living life while we have a chance and appreciating life. One of the major themes is that the family is stagnant. They can't grow. They can't change, and how that affects them and how they're no longer living because they can't grow or change. And so I can see why this book is such a classic. It's so beautiful and it's so easy to read. It's another really short one. I think it was like 110 pages or something. 148 pages. Nope, those are the questionnaires. So it was 139 pages. And it's definitely a book that I'm going to hold on to because I plan on reading this again. This is now my second reading of it, and I definitely plan maybe in another 10 or 20 years reading it again. Maybe sooner than that. Maybe not. We'll see. But I definitely loved this book. It was so good. It made me want to watch the movie, though, although the movie's never as good. And I don't remember anything from the movie except for, like, the end scene, which is probably why I was confused on the end scene for the book, was because I was remembering the end scene from the movie. But it made me want to watch the movie again. Reading the books always make me want to watch the movie. And then, for the very last book that I read was... I don't even remember what this was a prompt for. Let's go find out. Okay. This prompt was for... this book was for the Empty Barrel Inn, which was to read an indulgent read. This book is the fourth book in the Disney Descendants, book 4, the Disney Descendants book series. It is written in conjunction with the movies, which the third movie is going to be coming out in August, at the beginning of August, I believe, on the Disney Channel. And this book leads into that third movie and really sets it up. And that's one of the things that I love about the series, is you have to read the books to know really what's going on in the movies, because the movies are made assuming you have read the books. And so they don't explain things in the movies because they assumed you read the books and it's explained already in the books, which also frees up time for them to get to do other things that they need to get to do. This book, one of my favorite things about this book was I was reading it and I was partway through and I was like, this scene is really, really familiar. And then it clicked in my head. It was one of the short stories that they released earlier this year to advertise for Descendants 3. So, I'm going to link that down below. I think the short story is like 12 minutes. It's a scene from the book. They obviously added singing and dancing because they always got to add singing and dancing. Instead of having the sword fight that happens in the book, they have the singing and dancing. But it is the scene, like almost word for word. They changed a couple words, but it's almost word for word from the scene that's in the book. So, if you want a preview of the book, go and watch that short story. If you want to save it until after you've read the scene, it will still be down there so that you can find it and read it. Otherwise, just Google Under the Sea Disney Descendants 3, and you should be able to find it. And so, this book takes place in the senior year of Mal and Evie and Jay, and the junior year of Carlos, and that covers like all of the celebrations that they have during the year. It covers them trying to set up the VK program so they can get more kids from the Isle of the Lost into Oridon Prep. It also covers setting up Hades and how he's been trying to escape from the Isle. He's going to be a major player in Descendants 3. It covers the stone, which belongs to Hades. I love, I don't know if you can really see it. You see how, like, there's, like, the tentacles, like, the writing is the tentacles for Uma. And I just think that is so cool. Oh, and then there's this beautiful back. There's just something wicked is coming. And, they only really spend, like, a second in the forest. But it didn't even occur to me. She sees like a ball of light and hears her dad's voice coming from it. And it didn't occur to me until just now when I was showing you guys this picture that maybe the ball of light was the stone. I just assumed the ball of light was something that was made by Hades. I mean, they never really explained the ball of light. I assume they're going to explain it more in Descendants 3. We'll see. So the book is mostly just them having celebrations and like scavenger hunts and just fun and going back to the island and getting in trouble there as usual. And so it's definitely the perfect setup for Disney Descendants 3. I did get a little bit sad because reading this, you know, Carlos is a major character in this book, and Cameron Boyce just passed away a couple weeks ago. And so the whole time I was reading this, I kept thinking, like, you know, Carlos is going on and on about how excited he is because he's going to be having his senior year next year. And he's not. Well, I mean, I guess the character is. But the actor's dead now. And that's really sad. And so, especially because he was so awesome. But yeah, definitely, like, especially if you're interested in the series, read the book. I believe it's the final book in the series. It did remind me that I still need to read the smaller Descendants books because I haven't read them yet. And I forgot about Freddie and CJ being in Aradon. Freddie is the daughter of Dr. Facilier? Is that his name? The witch doctor from Princess and the Frog. And then CJ is one of Hook's kids. And they made it sound like CJ was actually back on Isle of the Lost. And I forgot about all of that because I haven't watched the shorts in a really long time and I haven't read the little books. So I need to get around to that. But I was really, really glad that I got to read this. And so those are the 4 books that I have up till now. I have 4 more books left in this book, Junkie Trails, and I'm really hoping I'm going to get them finished. We shall see what happens. But I will see you guys in a few more days with hopefully the answer to what happens with the rest of those books in the wrap-up. See you later. Bye.